How's it going, everybody? Welcome to another episode of LUMIX Live. This week, as the title says, we're going to be, kind of covering over the various different things that we have in the LUMIX cameras that can help you get your photos or your videos kind of like the best way you can right out of camera. Whether that's going to be someone that is out on, say, vacation or something like that, and you really don't want to play around too much in post, or if you're working on a job in the photo and video world side of this, and you don't really want to have to, or you don't need to necessarily go through the post-production side of it. There's a lot of things that we have built into the LUMIX cameras that can help you really try to skip a lot of that post-production. Now, I want to preface this entire conversation on the point that it is totally understandable that there are times where post-production, color grading, all of that kind of stuff, whether you're in photo or video, are incredibly necessary and required for certain things. So just keep that in mind. This is in the framework that there are those times where you don't want to do post, or maybe you don't have time to do post. So how do you set your camera up to get the best out of it so you don't have to do those sides of work? And obviously throughout the stream, if you have questions about, hey, how would this affect, in post-production, definitely ask those questions and we'll address those as well. But the primary focus is going to be getting your camera set up so that you can just get the results right out. And we are going to be talking both photography and videography through this particular stream. I have my G9 Mark II hooked up since that has all of the latest functionality that's available in the cameras. So certain things I'll try to call out when it's something that's related to or relegated to like the newest cameras versus things that are found in pretty much any of our cameras. So we will go through all of that kind of stuff. But before we dive into the topics, just want to welcome everybody. If this is the first time you are joining LUMIX Live, these are the weekly broadcasts that we do every Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern time for the most part. And they're all designed for you to have a direct touch point to the brand, so to Panasonic LUMIX. Feel free to ask questions during this broadcast. As you can see, Scott is asking a question here with the tag at LUMIX USA. That helps me see the questions on my side so we can try to get to as many of them as we possibly can during the broadcast. There are certain things that I can definitely answer, or as many things that I can definitely answer, or at least provide some guidance to. There are certain things that I don't have answers to, or I just cannot give you an answer for. So as we get to those, obviously, I will let you all know. As a heads up, questions or things about future products, future firmware updates, roadmaps, things like that, of anything that's not already publicly disclosed. Stuff outside of that is what I can't comment on. Feel free to ask them, but you're going to get the kind of normal answer of, unfortunately, either I don't know or I can't answer them. So just want to get that out of the way ahead of time. For those of you in the United States, I want to remind you about LUMIX Pro services. We have red and platinum tiers available here in the US. The red tier is free, so if you've purchased a LUMIX camera, follow the QR code that's either in the card in the box of the camera that you purchased, or you can follow the code on the link here, or on the screen now, or down in the description to get yourself registered for LUMIX Pro Services Red. That gets you into the system, so if you ever have any services or any issues, you can just go there. You have a portal to address any kind of problems with the camera. It's also how you get your extended 3-year warranty on new purchases, so you definitely don't want to leave that on the table if you've got a new camera. If you are looking for kind of like a next level of service and support, we do offer the Platinum level. That is a paid level service, but the Platinum level gets you the same 3-year manufacturer warranty extension, and it can be upgraded once you've got yourself into the Red program. But in the Platinum, that's where you're going to get 2-day repairs with next day shipping both ways, 20% off out of warranty, so if you drop or break a lens or camera, things like that, you get a discount on the repair. You also get access to the membership hotline. So Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern time is when you can actually call in and speak to somebody if that's how you prefer to contact and troubleshoot some challenges. If it's something that our call team can't support, 9 out of 10 times, I usually get the reach out, or Matt Fraser gets a reach out to kind of help troubleshoot some issues there. But then you also get annual sensor cleanings, EVF cleanings, lens calibrations, firmware updates, all the kind of normal stuff that you'd expect if you're a working pro or just someone that likes to really kind of have that higher level of protection. That's what you get in that program. To my information, I understand that this program, I believe, at least in what I'm showing here, is US based. I don't know if Canada is taking part in this, so I think it's Eli. It is something I have to check into. I am somewhat involved in the LPS side of our program, but not super intensively involved in it. But we do have the countries that are participating listed on the secondary link that in the description for the global page. So you can take a look at what's available in your other regions. While for Eli, I take a look, and I think I'm pronouncing your name right, while I take a look and see if Canada is covered under that part. So, as I mentioned, if you have questions during the stream, make sure to tag at LUMIX USA. Helps me see it, and we can go through that. But again, the main topics here are getting the best right out of your camera. Oftentimes, we get ourselves caught up in how hard you can push photos in post, how hard you can push a color grade in post, and those are incredibly important things to be able to cover. But what spurred this particular stream is the content that I have captured on the new 28 to 200 millimeter for the S series cameras, the new full frame lens that we came out with. And what I kind of noticed in my approach to using this lens is that while I have access to every single one of the pro lenses, all of our lenses for both micro four thirds and full frame, being able to go out there and actually just set my camera up the way that I can quickly take an image, since I'm primarily photography, I can quickly take an image, transfer it to my phone, and have it up either shared to family and friends if it's on a trip, or get it up onto a social platform if that's what I want to share it with, or even get it to a situation where I'm ready to make, say, a print of that photo, for those that still do prints. I started using the camera in ways that, obviously, because I have a very deep knowledge of how our cameras work, that I started realizing many people may not know that you have a lot of these functions, or maybe you have a light understanding of it. So we're going to take the time, go through the menus, and I'm going to show you a lot of the stuff that I use and how I set the camera up for capturing basically JPEG shooting for stills, but then also on the video side, how I prep the camera so that if I am going to be doing some, heavier editing, or even some light editing, how I have my camera set up so that I can do mobile editing for that video footage, but also save time in post-production by being able to just throw it onto a timeline and not have to mess around with colors too much. So, before we dive into that, I see a bunch of questions or comments that just came in. Scott says, are there any restrictions for creating a custom mode from one of the S&Q modes and setups? Just got the G9 Mark II. So for the most part, if you have your camera set up in slow and quick mode and you kind of set up the frame rates, the overcrank or the undercrank that you want to work with, the color profiles, all of that kind of stuff, there really aren't many, if any, major limitations to using the custom mode. So C1, C2, C3, all the way through C3-10. The thing to remember when you're setting the camera up, Scott, is that you want to put the camera into the mode that you want to have saved as the custom function mode. So in this case, turn the dial to slow and quick, set the camera up, and then go into the menu and save it to C1, 2, or 3, or whatever. And as a note, you can rename those as well, so you can keep a pretty easy way to know which mode you're in. Couple things to make sure that you set up when you're going to be doing this is if you go into the menu system here, like I've got, if you go into the custom option, which is gear, and then you go to the second page of the image quality option, and in this case, I'm using a G9 Mark II, so these things are going to be in the same location for your camera. For this, I'm going to go to Creative Video Combined Set, and I change all of these to the camcorder icon, just because this means that if I want to do ISO, white balance, photo style, everything listed on this page, if I want to be able to treat those separately for video functionality, which is create a video mode, by extension, which is the slow and quick option, if I want to treat all of those exposure changes, things like that, separately from if I turn the camera into PAS or M, so program, aperture, shutter, or manual, this will keep them separate. So you won't run into a situation where if I'm shooting in Vlog and I switch over to a photo mode, Vlog isn't carried over to that photo mode. Because if you are shooting in RAW, you do not want to be shooting with Vlog as your color profile. So that's really, to me, that's the main thing to keep in mind. The other smaller little thing about it is to also go in, and when you go to actually look at the custom modes, when you go into custom mode settings, you'll see that you have the limit, so you can limit how many custom modes you can set. 1, 2, and 3 are the hard dials, so that's C1, C2, C3. 4 through 10 are the options that are paired into the C3 menu option. So by default, the camera's going to ship with only 3 being shown, but you can go in here and you can set it up to 10 so that you've got everything kind of programmed. If you know, like, hey, I like for street photography, this is how I set my camera up. For vlogging style video, and what I mean by that is I'm either filming myself or I'm kind of just doing a walk around kind of thing. I can set that into a different one, etc., etc. So kind of keep that in mind. It's set by default at 3 out of the box. You would have to come in here and set it to 10 if you want to preset more than that. The other piece to set up here, especially on the G9 Mark II, so this is a G9 Mark II. I have to double check. It might be an S5 Mark II and newer feature, actually a GH6 and newer feature, is the how to reload custom modes. This one can be important depending on how you've got your camera set up for fast work. The system has a couple different ways for you to tell the camera, when I execute this action, reset that custom mode to the defaults that I programmed it to. So what does that mean? That means, like, if I change my white balance in C1, C2, or C3, if I have to change it in the moment, you can tell it to say, hey, if I change off of that and then go back into that mode, whether or not you want it to stay what you adjusted it to, or you want it to actually revert back to what the default kind of template was. The cameras out of the box, when you power them on and off, so if you power cycle the camera, it will reset them back to what they were programmed at. So this would, C1 would go back to what you saved as C1. You can turn this off. I don't always recommend that, because then you can run into situations where maybe you forget that you changed white balance in that mode, or you changed some obscure setting in the menu. Doing a power cycle is usually where I have this set to say, leave this on, because the power cycle is when I know, okay, I'm either done or, you know, I want it to forcibly reset. Returning from sleep mode and changing record modes, these are the ones that are going to be a little more up in the air. Returning from sleep mode, I usually leave off, because this is if you are using the power saving systems on the camera and say, you know, you're down for lunch or something between shoots. This is where if you let the camera just go to sleep, so not hitting the power button, when the camera wakes back up, it'll pick up where you had things processed. So if you've changed settings, it'll keep them. And then changing record mode, this is if you change out of C1 to a different mode on the mode dial. If this is on for any of these, it's going to revert it back to what you saved it as at the moment that you created those profiles. So just keep those in mind as you're working with custom modes on the camera. And for fast work, when you're just kind of like generally shooting around, trying to get it where I don't have to think as much, I don't have to worry about how much am I going to have to do in post with it, that can be a pretty big changing point for some people. Because the more you have to fiddle around with the camera because maybe you changed something, the less likely or the less fun you're going to have while you're out there. And fun can be either on a job, it becomes more stressful because something's changed, or if you're just casually shooting, something changes and then you just get a little frustrated. So these are the little things that can help make it faster and easier to just get the stuff right out of the camera without having to fiddle. Paul says, is there a way to format card slot A on original G9 without wiping out saved settings? So I don't have my original G9 here. I do not believe on the original G9 the saved settings and things like that, there isn't an option in the menu that says keep settings while format. On the newer cameras that are basically running the new engines for our system, this now does have that keep settings while format. If you turn that on, then yes, you can format your cards, and then all of that stuff is saved. So camera saved setting files, things like that. The older systems, I don't believe, had this. So an alternative for the original G9 Paul would be to connect the camera to the LUMIX Sync app on your mobile device via Bluetooth, and then you can save your camera settings to your phone. You can save your camera settings over Bluetooth to your phone. This way they're stored here, and then if you want to reload them, you can go in and have them stored and transferred back over that way. That's one way that you can do it. But yeah, otherwise you'd have to be a little more careful on the older cameras about how things are saved up for the settings there. I think it's Martin here, I think. It says, I've not seen any release notes for the January firmware. Did this just add support for the new lenses? That is a good question. I meant to bring this page up ahead of time. Let me just pull the LUMIX firmware update page. So many of the updates, whenever you look at them, so for G9 Mark II, I'm opening this page up right now, and let's take a look. There we go. So the update notes are what are going to be written right here. So the update note for G9 Mark II on January 30th was cases with vertical lines appeared. So there's your change log. That's what was addressed in that firmware. Every firmware update that we provide will have those kinds of updates added. You'll have the information as to what is being done in that firmware. And remember that every time you get a firmware update on a camera, a lot of times there may be better efficiencies that are just done in the camera anyway. So just operationally, you're always going to see some improvements in the firmware, even if it's not necessarily listed in the changelog, because it may be like a very, very, very small piece that actually has nothing to do with how people actually use the camera. It's just, it's code being made more efficient. Let's see here. Take a couple more questions, and then we're going to jump into the menus here. Joe says, any info on where dynamic range boost changes versus ISO? Unfortunately, I have not gotten an update on that yet. It's been a little busy with the 28-200 launch and the 100mm launch, but I will try to follow up with that for everybody. I apologize it's taking so long to get an update there. A lot of times those kinds of things just really come down to, we have the big time zone difference between our engineers in Japan and in the US, and having to explain what we're trying to get out of certain things. Sometimes it just takes a lot longer than I would honestly want it to take. But I will follow back up on that and see if I can get y'all an answer. Scott says, does Lumix have any replacement for the eyepieces for the G9 Mark II yet? I can't locate any at the moment, and I'd like to replace it with a larger eye cup. So, G9 Mark II, so it shares the same eye cup as the S5 Mark II and the Mark II X. That being said, as the manufacturer, we do not make different size eye cups for the cameras. I know back, like, with the original G9, there was a larger eye cup that was made that you could change the system out for. And those were very much like the GH5 platform, where they were kind of slide over and they would clip in. The newer cameras, they are hard mounted into the chassis, so it's not something that's really a user replaceable part. There may be third-party companies out there that are making like slip over ones for it, but it's not anything that Lumix makes as an accessory. So, okay. JM says, I have a lot of Olympus Micro Four Thirds lenses. What are any potential pitfalls using them on the G9 Mark II? Manual clutch work, no dual IS, but focus seems fast. So yeah, honestly, the only major thing that I know is not supported on the Olympus lenses to the Lumix cameras would be the what they call Sync IS, what we call dual IS. that's like the only major thing. As far as things like focusing speed, lens corrections, the profiles that the lenses have for various corrections, those things are all part of a standard. So if you take one of those lenses, you put it on the camera, it's communicating to the camera what lens it is, so that when you open it up in software, it knows, like if you open up in Lightroom, it knows what profile to apply for things like lens correction. Vice versa, because we do aperture rings and OM systems doesn't, you've got some challenges there. But a lot of that is down to whether or not OM would want to, basically give that information to us. It's not that it's not a it's a much higher level discussion than I have any place being involved with as far as the companies go. But yeah, and outside of that, I don't know if I would consider any of those pitfalls, honestly. Stabilization, when you go super telephoto, dual IS is a very beneficial thing, for sure. But a lot of times the optic stabilization, when you're out at certain distances, because it's further than what SEPA rates stabilization figures for all cameras, you're going to get a similar experience, whether you're using dual IS or not. For certain categories of lenses. But yeah, I don't think you really have much, if anything, to honestly worry about with the OM lenses on G9. Let's see here. All right, cool. So, as I mentioned, there's a lot that we have in the cameras that can help you get right from shooting to delivery without having to necessarily go through the post-process. And as I mentioned, I have my G9 Mark II hooked up here, and let me actually just turn on my other light here, so this looks better. Cool. So, first off, I want to actually talk about the kind of approach that I take for capturing images with my camera, and this is by no way this is how you have to do it, so please don't think that's what I'm trying to say here. This is just one way that I've found a lot of success working with it. I have been working with the LUMIX cameras exclusively for around 11 years at this point. Used to be DSLR shooter before that, and this is just what, through the progression of the systems, I have found it really seems to be the most comfortable way to capture for direct, quick output. So we're going to not talk about photo style first. I want to talk about the picture quality here. So depending on the camera that you have from the LUMIX lineup, the preview image that you're going to get on the display is going to change depending on the picture quality that you choose. If you are shooting just raw photos, which is a little counterintuitive to what we're talking about today, but follow me, we're going to get there. The raw photos from any camera, they are using an embedded JPEG that you are looking at on the rear screen. And one of the things that's happened over the years is that now that rear screens are getting, or rear LCDs or even viewfinders are getting higher resolution, or they're getting tighter pixel densities, you start to notice that raw built-in JPEGs are, one, they're not the full resolution of the image. So if you're capturing a 25 megapixel image out of it, the preview image you're looking at on the back of the screen isn't going to be the same resolution. It is almost always going to be a lower res version. Our raw files have a little bit smaller of a preview file in it. So in some cases, if you are looking to be able to try and determine critical focus through the playback on the screen, which, to be fair, I don't recommend anybody do anyway, the raw image is going to give you a fuzzier image if you are someone who zooms in all the way to 100% on the image. In cases like that, I highly recommend set it up as either raw and fine or raw and standard, so that you have that JPEG being created, because then the camera will default and use the full res JPEG as the preview image on the screen. Because the raw files have to be converted some way, because raw digital images aren't actually images, it's data that's then compiled to create an image. So when you do it this way, the playback image that you're going to get, you're going to be able to determine better how sharp it is, where your focal plane actually landed, things like that. So kind of keep that in mind as you're working with the cameras. So I always set my camera up as raw plus fine, and then I have my images separated out. So I'll set it, as you see here, raw to fine. And then I'll go into the settings menu. So that's the wrench icon here. And then under the SD card or the media option you have, so some cameras have CF Express plus SD, some are dual SD. In some cases, you have SSD, but SSD doesn't work with the internal memory. So in this case, I'll go to double slot function. And then here, I will tell the system, like, okay, I want my JPEGs saved to card slot 2. I want my RAW files saved to card slot 1, and I want my video files to be saved to card slot 1 as well. This can help you kind of organize where if you are a JPEG shooter, but you always want to have the RAWs as your kind of backup, you'll have all your JPEGs in one location, and your RAW files will be saved in a separate location. This way, they're the same file number, so when you bring them into software, you'll be able to cross-connect them, things like that. But you'll have an easier time flipping through to say, like, okay, I only want the JPEG for this to transfer to my phone or to post somewhere. The RAW files truly do just become a backup at that point. Or vice versa. If you're a RAW shooter, then you know all your RAW files are in one spot, your JPEGs are on another. This is also how I recommend if you're working on a shoot, on a photo shoot, where the client needs very fast turnaround, like they need basically a turn and burn job where you're delivering the result on the spot. This is what can also work well because you can have all your RAW files saved to one card, JPEGs all to another card, and at the end of that job, you can just give them the JPEG card. I don't know how often that's done as much anymore because it's been a few years since I've been out of like weddings and things like that, but when I did shoot weddings, that was how, in some cases, it was done, where at the end of the day, the JPEG card was handed to the manager of the group I worked for, and then they took those, compiled them, and that's what they used to give to some of the clients. So you have control here to make things easier for getting how fast you can get the stuff out of the camera. Now, the reason I covered this first is because the JPEG shooting concept is great, but you want to set it up so that the images you're getting out of the camera are the best you can get, are the way you want them to look. And the fastest thing to do with this is obviously you want to make sure that the color profiles are the way you want them to look. So you want to tune an image so that it is your looking image. Some people don't like the built-in camera color profiles that manufacturers use, and that's really kind of the point, is that modern day, it's to each their own. Every company's going to have their own kind of tone and look to an image, and whether you like that one or not, it's about being able to go in and change them. So if you've never gone into the photo style option this way, this is where even in the base color profile, so standard, natural, vivid, L Classic, Neo, you have control over what those profiles are represented as. So whether you want high contrast, whether you want to play around with the S-curve, the saturation, the hues, things like that, you have control of this under each of the main color profiles. You even have sharpening and noise reduction control, so you can change them. Now, 0 is what default is for these systems, and you'll notice that if I go in the noise reduction in this case, I can pull noise reduction down or I can increase it. So if you're setting the camera up so that it's you just shoot and deliver right away, or you have a particular style you want, but you like one of the standard profiles that we have, this is where you would do your edits to it. So come in, change some of these things around, get it to look the way you want it. If you're someone who likes a little more contrast, if you like a little less contrast, but you like the general color tones from a certain profile, you have them here. You can play around with it, and you're good to go. Once you set something in here and then hit the set button, it's now saved as that tweak that you've made to the color profile. Now, if you want to go a step further, this is where the utilization of LUTs comes in. And we've talked about Real Time LUT a lot over the last, since the S5 Mark II and the 2X came out. And there's a couple ways to look at Real Time LUT. If you're looking at this from the photography side, this is where you're going to use my photo styles 1 through potentially 10, because there are up to 10. Only 4 are shown out of the box. You have to go into the menu, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. This is where you come in, pick the color profile that you like to work with, and then you scroll down, and when you get to the bottom of this, This is where you'll see LUT. I can press the focus select button, and this is where I can apply a look on top of the particular image that I have applied. So this lets me come in and actually tweak the image based off a look that I've created in software. I have a video up on LUMIX Live about how to do this, so I will link to that in a card once this is posted. That walks through how you can create looks on your computer, export them out as .cube files, load them into your camera, and then you're able to customize it. So again, you're speeding up that process. You're not having to necessarily think, okay, now I've shot this, it's in RAW, I need to bring it to my phone because I want to use Lightroom Mobile or Snapseed or whatever editing software you use, or Capture One if you're on iOS. Do your edits, and then, you're done. This can give you a real quick, just get it off the camera, you can change the resolutions you want, and then, boom, the image is done, you're set. You'll also notice that some of these profiles, like L Classic Neo, as well as the monochrome profiles, have additional tools in here to change the color tonality of the image. So if we look at the black and white profiles, so this is for monochrome, so this is for monochrome, L monochrome, D, L monochrome S, or regular L monochrome, and then even for on the G9 Mark II for Leica monochrome. You'll also now see you have filter effects available. For those that have never worked with filters before from the film photography era in black and white, whichever color you're choosing is going to remove that color, basically. So I can choose yellow, orange, red, or green. And you'll notice that you get a little bit of a difference in the tonality. If you look at the back wall here, you'll see that you get different tones as I'm changing those filters out for this. It's the same principle we'd use in the film era, where say I want to make green foliage turn really, really bright. You'd pick the corresponding filter for that. If you want really, really dark skies, then you're going to add red onto that. And you're going to get really high contrast, really dark skies out of it. So you have, in the menu systems here, this is where you can change these particular parameters of the color profile to get you the image the way you want it, if those are maybe things that you would be doing in post. You'll also notice that you have grain effect when it comes to L Classic Neo and the monochrome profiles. So grain effect in our camera, this isn't digital noise. This is simulating film noise or film grain onto the image. You have 4 stages. You have off, so it's not going to apply any. It's just the only thing you're going to see noise or grain wise is just what your ISO, kind of puts onto the image. Then you'll have low, standard, and high. High, I would equate high to like 6400 speed film. Standard, I'd put to probably around like 1600 speed film. And then low, I would say, is a pretty mild, like 200 to 400 speed black and white film. These aren't specific, like we don't have them calibrated in that way. These are just what I would, the closest emulation I've seen when I shot film is about like this. So you can add these and change these. And the thing to remember is that when you make changes like this, when you make the grain effect, when you play around with the color filters, things like that, these are JPEG edits that are being done. So this is how the raw file is processed in camera to create a JPEG image. If you are going to want to put the raw files on your computer and then get them to look similar to it, the more you play around in this menu as far as what you want to add and kind of subtract, the more you have to do to the raw file to get the conversion. Now, programs like Lightroom and the entire Adobe Camera Raw collection have these base color profiles, and they're linked to the camera. So in this case, if I have a G9 Mark II, I put it into Adobe Lightroom or Lightroom Mobile or whatever, I'll have the ability to select Leica monochrome as a color profile. But if I have an S5 Mark II or a Mark IIX, I wouldn't have Leica monochrome because those cameras don't have it. So just kind of keep that in mind. You have the control to change a lot of these, but it is only going to adjust your JPEG still image. Now, once you get your profile all set up with how you visually like the image to look, and this is one of those things where it's going to be a little more trial and error. So if you set the camera up, do a couple of shots, usually, like, this is a case where I don't recommend using like color charts to set these kinds of things up. Go to the actual scene that you want to set up. So if you're doing landscape, just set the camera up, spend some time photographing a landscape while making some of these changes, and then you can transfer them right to your mobile device, be able to look at how is the reproduction coming out, how does it look, is this what I like, do I want to add maybe a little more contrast to it. Once you get all of that figured out, that's when you can just press the display button, and then you can save the current setting and all the little adjustments that you've made. You can save those, in this case, to the My Photo Style option. And then on top of it, I can also come in here and I can change the title of that My Photo Style. So as I'm going through, I'll know exactly which profile I've got. So in this case, if it's like Leica monochrome on the G9 Mark II, if I like more punch than what Leica monochrome provides, more contrast, I would probably name this like Leica monochrome plus con or something like that, so that I would know as I'm flipping through, okay, this is my high contrast Leica monochrome. This is my L Classic Neo with a LUT applied profile. We've seen on the channel here before, I've had some posts, like when we're looking through the camera, where I have things like Velvia or Kodachrome or things like that, which are LUTs that I've applied into the camera that I name basically as like, okay, this is what this is emulating. That's what gives me that flexibility. And the nice thing about it is that these can always be changed, right? So you can get yourself set up, you have the image look the way you want it. You don't have to play around with it in post, but if you're going back to shooting that RAW plus JPEG option, like I was saying, I will still always have the RAW file, because let's face it, a lot of times when you're capturing stills, there may be those times where you look back at an image and you're like, I kind of really wish that maybe I didn't have as much contrast. Maybe, I wanted a little more saturation in the image, or maybe I wanted to desaturate some of it. So you can almost think of RAW files in that case as kind of the emergency backup to the image, if you're thinking in this mentality of capturing images. Now, what about video shooters? Because obviously I'm talking a lot about photography, and many of you that buy LUMIX cameras, you're video oriented. Let's not kid ourselves on this. Everything that I just talked about as far as tweaking the look in the camera, for the most part is more limited for video users. If you're someone that shoots in Vlog, if you are a Vlog shooter, you'll know that you don't have control over contrast, the S-curve, things like that, because Vlog is flat. It is designed to be a flat edit in post profile. What you do have is sharpness and noise reduction control. So you do have some control over these. And remember that 0 is what is set as default out of the box based on what the actual profile is designed as on that given hardware. So hardware is the sensor that's being used in this case, and how Vlog is profiled and mapped to that particular sensor. So you have a little bit of control here, and you have a little bit of control over sharpness. The scales are different, so this is one of those areas where maybe you would play around with it. But if you like the Vlog workflow, or if you like how much dynamic range you can get out of Vlog, but you don't want to spend all the time in post, if you already have a look that you've got designed for a client, and you know that this is what the project's spec'd for, you've already kind of gone through the steps, they already know what they're looking for as far as the style goes, this is where Real Time LUT can come in. Because Real Time LUT allows you to have Vlog as the base, and then from your video editing software say, okay, this is the LUT or the look that I've created in, say, DaVinci Resolve. This is the look that I've created for this project as I spec'd the job out. I know that this is a fast turnaround. I'm not worried about wanting to have to bring it into post. I can come in, save that LUT from the software as a 33-point cube, put it onto the memory card as that .cube file, and load it right into the camera on top of my on top of my vlog footage. This will burn the footage in as the look that you are capturing. So this does not give you the log footage that just happens to have the look on top of it. This would be a what I called before like a turn and burn kind of look. This is, I'm not going to be editing in post, but I want to have this ready to go so that, like, say it's a social content post job that you're doing. I've got the look, the client's happy with how it's looking out of the camera. It fits perfect for what we need, and they need it as a quick turnaround. Cool, shoot real-time LUT for that particular job, have the LUT applied. You can select the various different LUTs right from this menu, and then shoot it, save it to the card, and then boom, you're golden, job's done, client's happy, you get paid. And to that point, like I said, there's a lot less control you have when you're working in Vlog. Now, for others, you also have things like the Leica 709 color profile. That is basically, it's a direct Leica 709 conversion out. In fast turnaround times, if you're working maybe in a more like broadcast style environment, this can be a real quick way to just be able to go, hey, I'm good. This is the profile that we need. This is the color space that we're working in. Once you set a profile like this is where it's much more important to do things like make sure that your white balance is set properly. And with our cameras, to get the best out of it, you know, yes, we have auto white balance, we have cool auto white balance, warm auto white balance. So these are how you want it shifted if you like a cooler look or a warmer look. Ideally, if you're coming from a different brand, some brands, their white balances are tuned cooler, some are tuned warmer. So lets you kind of match a little bit closer to those. But if you keep going further down on the list, this is where you have custom white balances. If you've got white balance cards, you can from here press up to select your white point or your gray point in this case for your white balance. Put that that chart into this box so it's being fully covered and exposed reflectively under the light that you are going to be filming in. Just press the menu set button. It'll take an image and it sets the white balance for that particular scene that you're going to be capturing it. Now you can save up to 4 of them doing it this way. But then you also have, if you're working in a totally controlled environment, you have Kelvin settings. I can come in here and I can set Kelvin all the way from 2500 Kelvin all the way up to, and I have to look this way because my face camera is covering where it is on the camera, all the way up to 10,000 Kelvin. So you've got a lot of kind of control here, and it even gives you the little kind of like icons of like roughly what the built-in presets are for white balance. So right now I'm at 6600, and you'll see that it's kind of around shade to cloudy. If I go down to 6000, it's kind of cloudy to sun. If I go to 5500, it's pretty much what our daylight is calibrated to. So you can go in there and play with each of these as far as white balance. So if you're looking to do direct out of camera work, it's much more critical that you make sure that your white balance is set. So once you've got all your color profiles tuned in the way you want the tones to look, the color saturation to look, then you make sure that you get your white balance nailed each time. Then the ending result in still or video that you're going to get out of the camera is going to be that much closer to the final product, to where you may only need tiny little tweaks in post, like brightness levels, if maybe you put it on your phone and you notice that if you're viewing your phone, because these are horrible tools to judge exposure on, so is actually the camera screens. Across the board, no camera screen is calibrated right for judging exposure. That's why we have tools in the camera. This way, you're only making minor little adjustments in post. Cool. Let me jump, because there were a bunch of other comments and stuff that came through, and I want to make sure that I take a look in here with some of this stuff. Where were we? Sixtus just got a G9 Mark II from the trade-in program. Awesome. Welcome to the system. Have you done a focus system tutorial that would help optimizing it for stills of concerts and other lowish weird lighting production? I have not done a specific one on that. I've done like mixed focus conversations on like ways to set it up. I am working on a recorded stream for that because of how more in depth that is and the kind of demonstrations I want to do with it. It's a lot harder than being able to do it live. So I'm hoping within the next couple of weeks I should be able to have that as a recorded segment. So we'll still do a live stream, but I'll have a pre-recorded segment to run on it. This way it can be kept on topic and I can make sure that all the points get across. Since I don't do this scripted, I don't have a teleprompter, I don't have any of that kind of stuff. But definitely a good point, Sixtus. When S5 II and X were first released, there was a shutter delay when using Profoto Connect. This was addressed in firmware, but small delay is still there. When will this fully be fixed? I haven't heard of anyone having an issue with the delay. Now, to be fair, I don't use the Profoto Connect. I don't know many people that do use the Profoto Connect. Vast majority of the photographers that I work with use the Godox system. So I will have to take a look at that. It's possible that it may not be an issue on our side. It's possible that it may be an issue on the Connect transmitter side, because they have to... If we're sending the pulse to trigger and then the trigger has to convert or do whatever it does to then send out, let me check on that and see, because again, like I said, this is the first that I'm hearing that people still have a delay, so I don't want to steer you in the wrong direction too much. Scott says, hi Sean, I know it's not on topic, but is there any update on more customization and exposure bracketing like classic 5-shot 2-stop increments? Yes, 5.2, if the body matters. So I haven't gotten any other information about being able to change the bracketing increment options. Right now, it is still set where it's the one-stop increment, being able to change between 3, 5, and 7. So if you want 7, it's 7 images at 1 EV apart. I know what the request is. It has been discussed. I just don't know where it stands as far as, like, is it something that's going to be updated? If it is, how long would it take? If it's not, why isn't it being kind of addressed? So that is something I have to dig further into. Kristen says, so glad for the custom mode settings when it comes out of sleep. Much easier to use during the day. The save of an on-the-fly settings, I mean. Yes. Camera combo. I'd just like to express my interest in a prosumer camcorder. Love their ease of use and size. I'd just like to have some better codecs and slightly larger sensor with smaller zoom. It's an interesting concept. We don't really talk too much about camcorders on Lumix Live, mainly because to be fully honest, one, it's not a category I'm super well informed of. Yes, I know that we have them, like, we have the X series camcorders. So if that's something that you have, things that you're looking specifically into, like, you mentioned, like, you'd have some better codecs. If you have, like, hey, these are the codecs you'd like to see, definitely let us know in the chat, because I work close with the team that makes the Panasonic camcorders. So the X series camcorders, not the CX camcorders. Those are the Pro AV group. But we've got the ability to kind of check through that kind of stuff here. Let me see here. Go Travel Planet. I apologize that I skipped your question. I was only tagged as @LUMIX, so it didn't show up on my side. It says, when using a G9 Mark II with the 9mm f1.7 or the Leica 6mm, which would be the best settings for astrophotography be and color profile? This is an interesting one. So best profile and settings for astro. It's going to depend on what you're trying to shoot and capture, right? If you want star trails, the biggest one that I suggest is Live View Composite. I use Live View Composite. I shoot in RAW for those scenarios, so I make sure that I'm capturing, because those I'm going to want to edit and post. Those aren't really going to be a direct out of camera. Typically, they can be. But a lot of times, you're going to want to do some edits to those. So for those, Live View Composite's probably the best solution, like I said. And Live View Composite, if you don't know what it is the option in our cameras to... Let me go into the menu to program it. Live View Composite is the feature that we have in the LUMIX cameras that allows you to do ultra long exposures through the compilation of multiple shorter individual images. So some call this computational photography because you're doing all these images, it's combining it in camera, and it's using the camera's horsepower to do it. It's pretty much what it is. But with our system, you'll see the option to select Live View Composite as a function button. When you have that set, you do have to have the camera in full manual. So if I set the camera to full manual, I can turn Live Composite on. I can set a shutter delay. Shutter delay will just mean if I'm not using a remote, like remote trigger, I can use the shutter button and just set how long I want it to wait before the shutter starts. But once I click start, you'll notice a couple of things. One, your shutter speed's fastest motion that it can make is 1.6 of a second. You can tune this all the way down to 60 seconds, I believe. Yeah, I can go all the way down to 60 seconds. Typically, the way I recommend using this is I'm usually at a 1.3. So 1. I always forget exactly what this is called. It's under a second. So I'll do this. I'll go in, I'll set my ISO to the value that I want it to be. In this case, I want to set this so that I'm kind of properly exposed here. But I have the ability to come in and say like, hey, all right, I want this to be, say, 3 EV underexposed, right? So if I remove this light out of the shot, I've got everything set here. And if I'm doing astrophotography, I'm in manual focus. So then now I can click the image. It's going to give me a black frame so that it can do noise reduction. And then now when I click the shutter again, you'll notice, like, look how dark that image is. And it's not getting any brighter. Even though I'm running right now, I've got a 5-second exposure. But now I can take the light and I can slowly bring that light in. And you see that it slowly builds the image up. Now, the reason I'm showing it this way is obviously I don't have any kind of stars that I can show in here. But what happens with this mode is that it is slowly building the exposure of the image. So I can paint, in this case, I can paint with the light to get a look that I want. Now, where this comes in with star trails is that this also works if light and stars are moving through the frame. So because I've set a very specific kind of look to the image, I can be making sure that the image that I'm creating for a star trail, for astro, I can have my foreground properly exposed, I can have my highlights properly exposed, and the stars can just build through the frame and complete the image. Now, what's super cool about this is that when I play back that image, that is a RAW and a JPEG image. So I have the actual result of what I captured here using Live View Composite. So then I can go in, and if it came out perfect the way I liked it, because I set all the other things that we talked up, I set up everything that we talked about first out of the gate, cool, I can just use that JPEG image and I'm good to go. But this also saves the RAW file. So I can take that RAW file, bring it in, and edit it just like any regular RAW file that I'd be working with on the camera. And then to turn this off, you just click the button again, you click the Q menu button, and then you're out of that particular mode. Okay, I have time for one more demonstration here that I want to bring up as far as how to get the best out of the camera to make sure that you're getting the best result out of it, because I do have to actually end this stream at 2 o'clock today, unfortunately. Last thing I want to bring up here is one of the things that actually was added to some of the more recent cameras, but we've never really talked about it much, and that is, if I go back into playback here, now I'm going to go into the playback menu. So this is the menu that if you have HDMI connected, you have to actually go into playback to do this. If you're not in over HDMI, this menu will be available. We have the option here that's called Magnify from AF point. So if I turn this on, what you'll notice is that if I come in and I just take a standard image, so let's go to aperture priority, we're at, let's go to f2.8, and let's move my focus box. So I'm doing this in a weird way because I don't. There we go. So I want to move this right here, right on that S5 Mark II. So I can take the image. Cool. Got an image. But now I can go into playback. And what this will do is this gives me a box over the spot where the focus was hit, whether I'm using face detect, animal detection, any of the modes that you have. So that now, if I bring the display back up, when I go to zoom in, it's going to zoom in on that spot that I selected or where the focus point was. So this gives me a real quick way to know, hey, this is what it said where the focus point was. Now I want to be able to zoom in, check, am I in focus? I'm cool, awesome, good to go. Move on to the next image. So if you're someone who likes to review your images as you're shooting, this can be a nice benefit for quick ability to check focus, to check, make sure that the image is what you wanted it to be. So just as a reminder, again, that's under the playback menu. So you can do this by reviewing an image, go into the camera menu, go down to the playback option, and it's on page 1, and it says Magnify from AF point. Okay, we spend the last 5 minutes here just addressing some questions, and then as I said, we have to wrap at 2 o'clock today, unfortunately. Let's see here. Paul says, is it possible to get the original 100 to 400 updated by Panasonic to accept teleconverters? No, there's more to it to accept teleconverters. So unfortunately, it's not something that can be backwards updated. Where did we go here? JC. Are the GH6, G9 Mark II, and S5 Mark II using the same color theory? Are they easy to match out of camera or by using with a LUT with Vlog? And if so, which LUTs do you recommend? So I'm not the best at color matching cameras, to be completely honest with you. I use scopes and wave like the vector scope to figure out whether or not the colors are close. My understanding from talking to filmmakers that are using like the GH6 and an S5 Mark II or a 2X, the GH6 is close to the S5 Mark II and the Mark IIX. Thing to remember is that the cameras that are running with the phase hybrid autofocusing system, the PDAF system, there is processing differences done for those sensors, because we've said from day one that adding PDAF array to the camera is going to have some impact on image quality. Whether that's going to be the color profiling, sharpness, noise reduction, just the way the image has to be processed. Now, all of the cameras are using similar generation processors. So the S5 Mark II uses the L² engine. G9 Mark II is using a variant of that engine that's, tuned for the Micro Four Thirds platform. And the GH6 is using what I would call the predecessor to those engines. Because of that, they're going to be very similar, but you'll notice that if you shoot in, say, standard or natural or vivid or, like 709, things like that, there may be slight little differences between them because the different sensors have also different characteristics. When it comes to matching, it's kind of the beauty of what Vlog is and what it was designed as. Vlog was designed so that if you came from Vericam to... which was the first camera, say like GH5, to the box cameras, to all the new cameras that are running it for Vlog L or Vlog. It was designed so that they would be able to be color matched very easily, and the only major difference between them was just going to be what the dynamic range capabilities were, because Vericam had its available dynamic range. The S-series cameras has more available dynamic range than the Vericams ever did. And then Micro Four Thirds is like right in that around 13 to 14 stops dynamic range. I think we listed as 13 plus. So tonality out of it, if you get a LUT, and this is why using like Real Time LUT and being able to create your own LUTs and load them on the camera can make this a lot easier for you, so you don't have to worry too much about this in post. If you just grab 3 clips of all of them, bring them in Vlog, match them in the software, you can then kick out and say, okay, this is the LUT I need for the G9 Mark II, this is the LUT I need for the GH6, and this is the LUT I need for the S5 Mark II or the Mark IIX, because then they're all going to be normalized, and I can have everything set so that as long as I know that I'm shooting and I'm exposing correctly, which skin tone and middle gray is calibrated to 42 IRE in Vlog. Doesn't matter what camera you're using that's using Vlog, or if it's Vlog L. As long as I set that, and I apply the look to it, I know that I'm going to have the colors will be the same through it because I've got the profiles to kind of offset any of the little differences between it. But yeah, should be pretty straightforward. Let's see here. Andy says, why haven't we seen any videos about the improvements of the LUMIX Leica 35 to 100 2.8 compared to the previous versions? From me, you haven't seen talk about it, mainly because I don't have the old versions. If I had the old versions, I'd happily do it, but also there's not a huge difference between them. Yes, the newer ones have the more unified color rendition, so the actual image rendering that comes out of them is now into Leica's standard look. If you were to take the Leica lenses and then a non-Leica lens, so I think the easiest one to recommend would be like 42.5 Nocticron versus 42.5 f1.7, or the 25.1.7 and the 25.1.4 Summilux. If you look at them side by side, disregarding the aperture differences there, like stop them down to an aperture that's similar between them, you'll see that the Leica series renders colors and microcontrast in a different way than the non-Leica lenses. So that's where you're going to see a lot of those differences. The other thing comes down to just general performance. 35 to 100, the new version, it's just everything's updated about it internally. So, you know, newest revision of the motors that are being used in that series. Even though we did publish the updates recently, if you haven't seen them, on February 21st, we did update the Leica 12 to 35, the 12 to 60, 35 to 100, 50 to 200. So those are the Leica lenses. The HSA 12 to 35 and the HSA 35 to 100. Now, little tip for those. The HSA series are the blacked out 12 to 35 and 35 to 100. The HS series were the purple ones, the first gen ones. So Gen 2 and then now the, what would be, I guess you're calling Gen 3, they've all got updates recently that added support, better support for the G9 Mark II. Because now with some of those older ones, it's things like adding the ability for zoom focus control. So as you zoom, it stays in focus. And then just general stability performance on the newer cameras. Let's see here. I can do one more question and then I have to jump off the stream here today. Cliff, any chance for higher punch-in magnification in video shooting? We've asked about it. I just haven't gotten an update on that particularly yet. We did just push the updated 20x magnification in the photo use cases, like we talked about a couple months ago. I believe they're looking into it, trying to work and see how it goes. But yeah, I don't have that big of an update for you yet. And then Fielding says, would you still use live composite with Star Tracker or just the long exposure? Star Trackers, I would probably not use live composite. I would most likely, because if you're using like a good enough Star Tracker and you've got it all calibrated, you don't need to use live view composite. It'd be interesting to try it, but the Star Tracker kind of offsets the need to use live view composite. The benefit you get with live view composite is that you're doing multiple images as things move, so areas that are not in the like the actual stars that you're keeping in position, theoretically they're going to get cleaner and they're going to look better noise wise, because you're going to constantly overwrite if it had noise and then now it has some information. The trade-off being that as the Star Tracker moves, live view composite, you're going to see movement outside of the stars more. So clouds can look funny if they happen to come into the frame. If you're tracking and you have like foreground in place, it's going to look even weirder. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're going through that. So with that, everybody, unfortunately, I do have to call this week at this point. There's a lot more I wanted to talk about. Maybe we'll pick this topic up next week and kind of continue with some of these. With that, though, thank you, everybody, for tuning in, asking some awesome questions, providing some really cool feedback. I'm sorry I didn't get to everyone's questions. Normally, I know we have been running these about an hour and a half, but a little tied up for today. We will be live again next Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern time here on YouTube. So if you liked this content, give us a like. If you don't subscribe already, maybe we earned a subscription for you. Share the stream out to people that you think may find use for this. It helps me grow this and hopefully be able to do cooler and bigger things throughout this year. Otherwise, if you don't already, go check out our Instagram account. Follow us over on TikTok if you're someone who likes to just go through and kill time watching funny content. It's usually a little more funny content on the TikTok side, so if you want comic relief stuff, go take a look at that. Otherwise, thanks again, everybody. I hope you have an awesome rest of your day. I hope you have an awesome weekend, and I look forward to coming back next Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern time, right here on YouTube. Later.